Welcome to today's live reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, the Sages of Naimisharanya. We are covering the chapter 13 at the moment. Vidura instructs the blind king. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we shall continue from yesterday. Vidura was instructing the Dhritarashtra that how he should move away from the kingdom, the palace, and try to renounce the material comforts and set the stage for his next stage of life. Vidura spoke urgently. You must try to become detached from material life, otherwise you will be forced to take birth again. I have performed many sacrifices in this life. I will surely get a good rebirth. You do not understand, said Vidura. Kali Yuga is approaching. All good qualities of men will greatly diminish. Better to get out of this material world in this life rather than risk another birth in the terrible Kali age. He placed a reassuring hand on the Dhritarashtra's arm and added, I will help you, brother. I will guide you every step of the way. The Dhritarashtra sat in thought. He knew that to be guided by a saint like Vidura was a rare and invaluable opportunity. He also knew that Kali Yuga was approaching. Vidura was right. Now was the time to become serious about spiritual salvation. He replied softly, very well, let us go. Gandhari broke her silence and rising said, Dear husband, I have been ever faithful and obedient to you. Pray therefore, take me with you. I too wish to cut my attachment to material existence. Dhritarashtra and Vidura both agreed. Confident of Gandhari's capacity for austerity, taking nothing, they left secretly soon after sunset. The next morning, as was his custom, Yudhishthira rose before dawn and performed his worship of the Lord. He was joined by learned brahmanas from whom he heard scriptural instructions. As they left, he respectfully gave them grains, cows, land, and money in charity. Then, as usual, he went to offer his respects to his elderly uncle and aunt, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, thinking he would find Vidura with them. Approaching their quarters, he saw Sanjay slumped on the floor, weeping. My dear Sanjay, what is wrong? Yudhishthira asked. Sanjay looked up. His eyes reddened from crying. Turning toward Dhritarashtra's inner chambers, he shook his head sadly. Filled with a sense of foreboding, Yudhishthira entered his uncle's residence, but there was no sign of him or Gandhari. Vidura was also missing. Walking briskly through the quarters, he called their names, but there was no reply. This was most unusual. Returning to Sanjay, Yudhishthira anxiously questioned him, Where are my uncles and aunt, Sanjay? The Dhritarashtra's servant kept his head down, weeping uncontrollably. Yudhishthira's anxiety increased. Has the grief of their son's death finally overcome them? Have they, pained by my grievous offences toward them, drowned themselves in the Ganges? Feelings of guilt and separation overwhelmed Yudhishthira, and he lamented piteously. When we were young orphans, the Dhritarashtra and Vidura took us in and protected us. Please tell me what has happened to them. Chapter 13, verses 35 to 46 now. At first, Sanjay was unable to reply, but he simply sobbed. Gradually, he calmed himself and, wiping away his tears, replied in a strained voice, My dear descendant of the Kuru dynasty, I have no idea where they went. O king, they have cheated me, for although I have been Dhritarashtra's ever faithful servant, he left me without a word. News reached Narad of the Pandavas' apprehension for their elderly uncles and aunt, and he decided to visit Hastinapur. When the sage arrived playing his lute, Yudhishthira and his brothers rose from their seats to welcome him. After the formal reception was complete and they were all seated, Narad inquired about the welfare of the Pandav's family. Yudhishthir sighed, "O godly personality, I do not know where my two uncles have gone, nor can I find my ascetic aunt who is devastated by the loss of all her sons. Please help me cross this ocean of grief." Narad replied, "O king, do not lament for anyone, for everyone is under Lord's control." To assure Yudhishthir that his uncles and aunt had not left for any fault of his, Narad explained that all living beings are bound by their God-given duties, as a cow is bound by a long rope. "My dear Yudhishthir," Narad said, "it is the duty of royalty to renounce the world at the end of life in order to pursue spiritual enlightenment. Their departure is therefore desired by Krishna. As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them." Still Yudhishthir's grief could not be assuaged. He held his head in his hands and wept, thinking of the dangers of his blind elders faced. Narad lovingly chided him, "My dear king, your grief is due to illusory affection and nothing more." Yudhishthir looked up, confusion evident in his eyes. Was he meant to have no feelings for his elders? Narad patiently reasoned with him. "Consider this, Yudhishthir. If a person is the body, then your affection is for the chemical constituents. Is that sensible? If the person is a spirit soul, then why lament? The soul continues unharmed even with the body's demise. If you say that the person is both the soul and the body, then still there is no reason for lamentation, as the chemicals comprising the body continue to exist, as does the soul. Therefore," continued Narad, "your agitation is only due to ignorance. Stop foolishly thinking that without your protection they will suffer. The Lord only protects us. We must simply do our duty." Some really wonderful teachings here by Lord Narad. Yudhishthir's heart became a little pacified. Narad's word made sense. Still, it was hard to give up his sense of responsibility for his ailing elders. Seeing the king's lingering unhappiness, Narad patiently continued to instruct him. "Everyone's material body is under the influence of nature, time, and their karmic reactions. People in the mode of ignorance and passion are unable to help anyone, for they cannot see things as they are. Those in goodness can help others to some extent. Even by the influence of time and destiny, they will eventually be frustrated. Time is like a cobra whose bite is always lethal. How can a person who is himself under time's influence help others?" Chapter 13, verses 47 to 50 now. Yudhishthir remained morose. His uncle and aunt were accustomed to being served the finest foods. How would they survive in the jungle? Narad reminded him that everyone depends on the Lord for the food. Even in the forest, by his arrangements, there are wild fruits and vegetables. Yudhishthir had a doubt about Narad's instructions. Wiping away his tears, he asked, "If we are all controlled by nature, time, and karma, in what sense do we depend on Krishna?" "This is a good question," replied Narad. "Try to understand everything is the Lord's energy, including the living entities, the modes of nature, time, and karma. As such, it is all under his supreme control. Only because we forget this do we suffer. Therefore, the Lord manifests within us as the super soul and without as the spiritual master and scripture. Just to rectify our errant mentality, only by taking his guidance can we remain undisturbed by material happiness and distress." Placing a reassuring hand on Yudhishthir's arm, Narad said, "Time is merely another form of your friend Krishna. As time, he destroys the faithless, but he is not at all dangerous to his faithful devotees. He came to the earth to help the gods by annihilating the miscreants. Soon he will end his earthly pastimes. When Krishna departs, good king, you and your brothers should also leave. Chapter 13, verses 51 to 60. Narad informed the king about the welfare of his uncles and aunt Gandhari. Dhritarashtra and his wife will soon attain pure consciousness and ascend to the spiritual atmosphere. Feeling both delight and grief, Vidur will resume his pilgrimage. The sage then took his leave. Yudhishthir sat in thought. Narad's words had filled him with another anxiety. Krishna's departure was imminent. Would it be possible to see him again before that time? He asked Arjun to go immediately to Dwarka to ask the Lord about his plans. Thus ends the 13th chapter. Vidur instructs the blind king. Next time we will start chapter 14, Ominous Portents. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.